presentation for Restorative Justice for Victims of Racism, Loneliness, and Physical Health. My name is Tandy Tillinghast. Over the past 20 plus years in undergraduate, graduate, and high school education, I've seen students of color and people in our communities impacted negatively by racism. In 2018 and 19, I served as co-chair of the Diversity, Inclusion, and Intercultural Professional Learning Committee for assessing diversity within the curriculum. We noticed a significant gap. In 2022, I took a graduate course, Race and Social Justice, and completed my certificate in social justice in June 2023. This proposed research will become my thesis toward a Master of Science in Justice Studies, complete in June 2024. I'm committing my forthcoming career in justice and research to making an impact on racism and injustices for people of color. Throughout my studies, I've noticed the impact of racism on health and loneliness. In this proposed research, I'm interested in examining the correlation between racism, loneliness, and physical health. Consequently, a key hypothesis is restorative justice supports and decreases the negative effects of racism on victims or a select group. It's important to scrutinize the impact of racism and loneliness. For instance, in 2020, health researchers scholars Wright, Friedman, Jones, Satar, Fresco, and Moore revealed a correlation between discrimination and stress using the Everyday Discrimination Scale. The work of social neuroscience, Dr. Vivek Murthy and Drs. John and Stephanie Cacioppo estimated that about 1/4 of the population regularly feels lonely and reported that chronic loneliness increases the odds of an early death by 20%, about as much as obesity. Possible visual indicates victims of racism experience loneliness and both negatively impact physical health. In this presentation, we will be This researcher proposes to answer the following. Restorative justice, impact loneliness and physical health for victims and a select group who've experienced racism. What are prior literature on racism reached the following conclusions. In a 2023 study, researchers Nelson, Brown, Garcia, and Moreno, utilizing the UCLA Loneliness Scale, found that racialized stress and social isolation negatively impacted Black women. In 1997, Williams et al. Created the still utilized Everyday Discrimination Scale in the Journal of Health Psychology. Current U.S. Surgeon General Murthy reported to Congress in 2022 on the mental health of marginalized and minority youth during and after COVID, which became a public health report. In 2022, Ojembe et al. Also reviewed more than 15,000 peer-reviewed articles, selecting 27 studies on loneliness among Black older adults, examining social integration, guidance, reliable alliance, opportunity for nurturance, attachment, reassurance of worth as key attributes that influence loneliness. Past literature on loneliness shows that social neuroscience researchers, the Casiopos and Murthy, lead the way to understand the impact of loneliness and physical health. Russell et al. Creates and revises the UCLA Loneliness Scale. Dr. researches the effects of coping mechanisms on loneliness. 257 participants, including justice-involved individuals and 112 men from the general population, using a 6-factor multivariate analysis. Health researchers Xia and Li find the impact of loneliness on cardiovascular health and mortality, compiling data from numerous studies about the impact of loneliness and social isolation on morbidity and mortality. This research indicates animals and humans are at increased risk for cardiovascular disease. Et al. Sayi et al. Studied the effects of loneliness on prisoners, which includes those subjected to racism. Less substantial literature on restorative justice or intervention suggests and recommend research on mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, or other interventions. And Brock have research in press at the Journal of Psychology on coping with loneliness. Singh, MD, provides research on social resilience, enhancing interventions for structural racism. In 2012, researches the impact of restorative justice on racism within the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As you can see from prior research, the relationship between racism and loneliness, racism and physical health, and loneliness and physical health has been studied by researchers. However, the previously mentioned research suffers from limitations in that none of it considers the intersection of all three in select populations, especially victims. More importantly, little attention has been paid to interventions for victims of racism and loneliness. The lack of intervention leaves victims grappling with racism or loneliness, including traumatic events and attacks, without support. In turn, this stress results in long-term health consequences, increased morbidity, and early death. Accordingly, this graduate research project intends to survey a select group who have experienced racism and loneliness to study the effects on physical health. The procedure entails a self-administered survey, online and paper, using Likert scale or Likert-like questions. The participants include using Qualtrics, surveys of victims participating in restorative justice pre and post. Overall, this research will be conducted on victims of racism and loneliness and the impact on physical health. The graduate research proposed involves a survey of questions selected from adaptations of the UCLA Loneliness Scale, the Everyday Discrimination Scale, and the RAND 36-item Health Survey 1.0 questionnaire. These will give the experiment external validity because these scales have been used in numerous studies. This research proposes the following measures. The majority of questions use a Likert or Likert-like scale, which will allow for easier analysis. The independent variable is restorative justice. The dependent variables are racism and loneliness. These will be measured through surveying victims and another select group about racism, loneliness, and restorative justice. Health would be a control variable, but also could be treated as a dependent variable. Other potential control variables are factors such as demographics, health, and other consequences of racism. Using select questions from the Everyday Racism Scale, participants may be asked questions such as, in the past 12 months, how often have people acted as if they're afraid of you? Employing the UCLA Loneliness Scale, participants will be given statements like, I feel part of a group of friends. Adapting the RAND 36-item Health Survey 1.0 questionnaire, participants may receive questions like, during the past 4 weeks, to what extent has your physical health interfered with your normal social activities with family, friends, neighbors, or groups? Moreover, a restorative justice intervention will be conducted on victims to measure the impact of restorative justice on racism, loneliness, and physical health in this population. Evaluating the data involves a multivariate regression analysis. On the Restorative Justice Coalition of Oregon website, experts share the following definition. Restorative justice is an impact-centered community response to crime and other misconduct that focuses on healing harm caused to victims and survivors by facilitating meaningful accountability processes with those responsible. This graduate research proposes to ascertain restorative justice supports and decreases the negative effects of racism on victims. Much gratitude for considering and heeding my research proposal. Together, we can make a difference for victims of racism and loneliness through restorative justice. Be well, Tandy.